Hi, everyone. My name is Alli Katz. I am the program coordinator here at the Writers' House, and we're so excited for this event. First of all, I want to thank Cheryl family on behalf of everyone at the Writers' House. Her support for this program is outstanding. It allows us to have really, really great fiction events here. And tonight is an extra special event. I'm so sorry. It's been a long time since I've publicly spoke without a mask on. And there was a bird in the bathroom today. So this is big news. That's the biggest news of the day, is actually that there was a bird in the Writers' House bathroom. I'll show you all pictures later if you want. But it's an extra special event because our two readers, it's kind of a homecoming. We have two alumni readers, I believe both class of 2010. So in my mind, that was like last week that they graduated. And they are also friends. So tonight we have Alyssa Songsiridej and LIZA St. back home, in a sense. So welcome. Each reader is going to read for about 10 minutes. We're going to do a Q&A, so you'll have your chance to ask all of the questions that you might have, which are probably a lot. And then we're going to finish with cheese. So much cheese out there for you to eat. There's also wine and crackers and fruit and other things that people eat with cheese. We have copies of Little Rabbit for sale for $10 or for $20, not for $10, for $20. And if you haven't already read it, you're going to want to read it after Alyssa reads, because Alyssa will read and you'll be like, I want to know what happens. And so you should buy it, and then Alyssa can sign it, and then you can say that you have a copy of the signed book from Alyssa. That is how signings and readings generally work. Those are that's the shape of tonight. And we're going to start with LIZA. LIZA St. is a writer and translator. Her work has appeared everywhere. By everywhere here, I mean Tin House, New York Tyrant, The Believer, Wigleaf, The Collagist, Paris Review Daily, and a bunch of other publications. She's an editor at Bomb and a senior editor of the literary annual Noon. She teaches creative writing at Columbia University and the Cooper Union. Like I said, she's an alumni of Penn and took fellows in this very room with Joyce Carol Oates and David Milch, and who was the third fellow? Susan Howe, which is pretty cool because now she's also going to be up here at the podium. Here's LIZA.
Thanks, Alli. It's really nice to be here. Thanks, Alyssa. Everyone read her book. I'm also just so happy to see my teacher, Max Apple, here. Anyway, I'll start. I'm going to read from a story called Hurl Your Thunderbolt. For months, my mother had been falling for magicians. At first, she favored two in particular, but eventually it seemed any old magician would do. I could see the appeal. They were charming and confident, were excellent listeners with impeccable short-term memories, and they could do surprising amounts of mental math. Meanwhile, my father had just been falling. There wasn't anything identifiably wrong with him. He'd always been a bit absent-minded, but now he was flat-out forgetful and often on the floor. Soon every visit home involved a magic show, and when I couldn't go with her, my mother would send me links to virtual shows, texting me throughout with reassurances that it was just about to get good, or that he's even better in person. The magicians kept things honest. They would tell you that magic isn't real exactly. It's the belief in magic that is magic. They'd say, "What do you think I have in this box? Name something and I'll pull it out for you." Then there's the anticipation. And the magicians my mother liked would say that any magician worth their cards will tell you up front that in that space lies the true magic. What a bunch of cheesy bullshit, I'd say, but I was easy to dismiss. I wasn't on stage or under a spotlight like her magicians going on about real magic, believable 24-karat, no need to hold your breath magic of the everyday. One magician had a friend whose every dream became reality, which I took to mean he knew the person with the world's most boring dreams. The other had a friend who was guided by voices. One night, stoned and sound asleep, she'd gone and clutched her boyfriend's testicles, twisting them enough to wake him, shocked and reeling from the pain. A voice had made her do it, my mother's magician assured us. After a while, my mother began going for long walks with one of the magicians. His name was Eyeball, and the only trick I ever saw him do was pop his eye out of its socket. Given this move, I thought his name self-explanatory. But he'd create opportunities to tell stories about its origin, and I never once heard him tell the same story twice. He was saving a baby orangutan from a brush fire and ran into a tree he hadn't seen on account of the smoke. He was hit on the side of the head by an ejected ski flung from a lift. His brother pushed him down the stairs as a child, and he'd bonked a banister, suffered seasons of bullying. He was the most talented casual liar I ever witnessed. Trust never mattered much to my mother. Still, Eyeball didn't last long. None of them could. Getting to know a magician only diminished their powers. The more he knew about my mother, the less impressive his guesses. In elementary school, my best friend's dad was a magician. Half the parents in our grade hired him for birthday parties, and I think it embarrassed her. "Stan, Stan, the magic man," we would chant. Her mom was some kind of lawyer, and now I can see that the power dynamics were a bit off. But he was always available to take us to the park, where we would play basketball one-on-one for hours. One day on her roof, I asked her what it was like to have a dad who goes to everyone's birthday parties. "I don't know," she said. I tried not to think about it. I'd had these books at the time that advertised all the free things companies gave away to kids who knew how to ask for them. Things like toys and stickers, pencils and stamps, coloring books, temporary tattoos. From an auto dealership, I received a branded yo-yo. From a yogurt factory, a miniature stuffed gorilla, their mascot. I collected my loot in the corner of my room and positioned myself on the rug with a stack of envelopes and stamps. I spent weekends addressing letters and using the exact phrasing the companies requested. Dear Hershey's, dear Costco, dear United Airlines, dear Johnson & Johnson, dear Chevron, dear Coca-Cola Company, dear AT&T, dear Berkshire Hathaway, dear Boeing, dear Walmart, dear General Motors, dear Pfizer, dear Disney, dear Visa, dear Procter & Gamble, dear Bank of America, dear Home Depot, dear Intel, dear JP Morgan Chase, dear Wells Fargo, dear ExxonMobil, dear PepsiCo, dear Amazon, dear Verizon, dear Apple, dear Microsoft, dear Comcast, dear Cisco Systems, dear Warner Brothers. Sometimes there was a choice to be made between, say, a magnet, a bouncy ball, or a magic wand. I spent hours every weekend in the magic shop near my house, and the only thing I ever bought was a replica dime, intricate, every detail in place, but it was 1/3 the size of a real dime. I thought it would be funny to pretend to pay with it, to give people change and act as though I had the power to convert a normal-sized dime into a tiny dime. Funny, that is, until one of them didn't want to give it back. I bought that dime from the special glass case beneath the register, where every visit I saw flashier objects, fake excrement, weighted dice, marked decks, and methodically asked to see each object in the case, even those I'd never be able to buy. I bought 1/3 of a dime for $13, a trick at my own expense. A cheap lesson, my mother would have said by way of comforting me, but I never told her about the dime. At the time, she showed no interest in my tricks or even in my best friend's father's. Our acts didn't involve giving money to a stranger promising to put on a show. The rush of volunteering to participate. One time, the trick she'd volunteered for involved the magician guessing personal details, such as audience members' hometown area codes, birthdays, current mailing addresses, and he got them all right. He told my mother her mother's favorite food, whole lobster with butter sauce. Wasn't that like saying someone's favorite bill was the 100, I asked? And did you want to add your social for good measure? How did you do it? Tell me how you did it, my mother begged. Abracadabra? Said her magician dismissively. You know, he continued, even the conjuring phrase has mysterious origins. Used since the Middle Ages, it could be from Hebrew meaning hurl your thunderbolt even unto death, from Aramaic meaning I will create as I speak, or from Latin meaning to open the cadaver, a practice of necromancy connected with reading entrails. My father didn't want to acknowledge the falling, but also couldn't travel, so my mother hired someone to stay with him, to help as needed, and she planned herself a birthday trip to Paris. By way of asking me to join her, she told me it would likely be her last. Birthday or trip to Paris, I asked. Either, she asked in return. Her own mother had performed a kind of magic from her hospital bed, lip fillers and Botox along with the chemo, and though my mother had complained of pain for some time, I couldn't imagine her going out easy. In Paris, everywhere we walked, there were new opportunities for my mother to be duped. Choose which of these 3 cups contain the street artist's ball. She paid to guess wrong and did it again and kept saying, "Ah," as though imbuing skewed probability with emotion helped her odds. We made our way to the Double Fond, a bar upstairs and magic show restaurant downstairs that one of her newer magicians told her about. We had reservations for multiple courses, but early on my mother had already had too much to drink, was falling asleep. Every act reminded her of someone or something she'd seen before. The walk back to the hotel revived her a bit, and we laughed into the night about Eyeball and the rest. Then when my mother went to sleep, I drew a bath. In the tub, I remembered our first ever magic show together, an accidental audience at a bar in a dark theater with low expectations, wowed by card tricks as simple as those I'd practiced with Stan next to a bounce house in a gray parking lot. The tricks were performed by a bartender who had taken over the corner of an Indonesian restaurant for his makeshift show, sectioned it off with red and white hanging flags. We ordered lumpia at the bar, and even my father was impressed, or maybe he was just happy that my mother didn't have complaints about the food or the service. Indonesian places usually got her talking about her time living in Bali with her ex-husband and how much better the food, everything there was. But at that first show, there were no comparisons, no expectations. I couldn't have known then that I would be tempted to ask her magicians things as though they were intuitives, true soothsayers, as though they could ease the loss I already felt. After that first show, the magician approached us. I could see my mother's excitement as he handed her a piece of paper with the name and address of the hospital where she was born written on it. He looked her in the eyes, as though within them he could see a film reel unfurling, and he said, "Sometimes making something leads to nothing." Thanks.
I'm going to be thinking about dimes that are slightly smaller than regular dimes, probably for a really long time. Thank you, Liza. Our next reader is Alyssa. I'm still in live mode here. Alyssa Songsiridej. Alyssa is from Iowa, and now she lives in Philly. But for a while, she lived in Boston. She's back. She's the National Book Foundation 5 Under 35 honoree and is the managing editor at Electric Literature. Her first book is Little Rabbit. Once again, Little Rabbit for sale right back there. Buy it if you don't already have it. And the book has been huge. It's a Goop book club selection, which I want to know everything about and have so many questions about. And it's really, really, really compelling and sexy in the way that she asks in the acknowledgement or says that her parents aren't allowed to read it, which is probably my favorite note in any acknowledgement I've ever read. I would like to just have lines of things that I write that I tell my parents, you can read up to here and then not after this part. And it's also very, very much about friendship and about art and about money in a way that almost no fiction is. And it's really an amazing kind of part of the book. I I'm so excited to have Alyssa here because this is one of the only books that I've read, but definitely one of the best books I've read in the past couple of years. I have small children, so I have to be very selective, and I was very selective towards this book. And so I'm thrilled to welcome her back home here to the writer's house. So thank you for coming. Welcome to Alyssa.
Thanks, Alli. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for reading this book when you have two small children in the house. I hope it was a fun distraction, immersion, or something. So I was debating what to read before I came here, and I was going to read a sex scene, but then Max is here, so now I feel awkward. But also, unfortunately, a lot of the book is sex scenes, so there might still be one in there. This is from an early chapter. I think all you really need to know is that the main character is not named at this point. She is, and she's in a relationship with this older modern dance choreographer who has a dance troupe and like a nice house in the Berkshires. Okay, all right. The weather turned vividly hot, even in the mountains. I took a dip alone in the pond, floating on my back as the water slipped over my bare skin. He'd fitted the pond with a silent filtration system, lining its borders with purifying plants to keep the water clean. Against the bright background of the sky, I picked out a dark shadow, some taloned bird of prey. Where was he? Flipping upright, I scanned the yard and found the choreographer by the tree line, staring into the forest through a pair of miniature binoculars. "What are you doing?" I asked, paddling closer. "I think I hear a northern mockingbird." "That's the most old man thing I've ever seen you do," I told him. "Really? I heard it's the new millennial craze." I sucked in a breath, dunking myself under to cool my face and to listen to the strange sounds of the water. Wrinkly, done, I swam to the dock and pushed myself out. He dropped the binoculars and turned away from the forest, watching my bare body as I crossed the Adirondack chairs. Small blades of grass stuck to my wet feet, and I squeezed my hair dry with my towel before wrapping the fabric tight around myself. Dropping back into the chair, I eased into the warm wood, closing my eyes and listening to him approach. "A couple of friends just got into Lenox," he said, taking the seat next to me. So he probably wanted to drive over to see them. I got ready to tell him I didn't mind spending the evening alone. "They want to come over for dinner. Is that okay?" I propped myself up, eyes open. "They want to eat here?" I repeated. "How are you going to explain me?" "I was planning to just say you're my partner," he said. "That's the term now, right?" I settled back into my chair, lower and deeper than before. "I'm your partner, huh?" The word brought a new structure, a fresh box encasing me. "How do you explain me to your friends, to Annie?" I didn't. I stayed quiet. "Are you nervous?" "No," I said. "Why would I be nervous?" I got up, went back into the house to shower. He followed. "So they're not really friends," he continued. "They're donors." I stopped walking and turned to face him. My bare, wet feet squeaked on the wood. I tried to push the dinner to the week, but his empty hands twisted in the air, miming beggary. "It's okay," I said. "They're going to be a lot." "I deal with econ professors all day," I said. "I understand a lot." I got in the shower to wash off the essence of pond, then dug around in my bag for something that didn't say younger sex friend. I picked tan linen pants, a plain black blouse, some jade earrings that had belonged to my mother. Then minimal makeup and twisting my dark hair into a braid. As I helped the choreographer set the table, I had the eerie feeling that I was putting out cloth placemats at my parents' house. The good silver, fine napkins, brass holders for the candles. He uncorked the reds, letting them breathe, then took care to properly chill the whites. "You are nervous," he said as I checked my reflection in one of the decorative hall mirrors. "I am." I turned to him. "I wasn't expecting to play hostess in your life tonight." He held me close, kissed my forehead. "You'll be wonderful." Their names were actually Franny and Dodge. They came in fresh and smelling of peonies, Franny dressed in what I thought of as a summer cardigan. They hugged me with only their hands. The choreographer's face turned tight as he spoke to them, showing too many teeth. They must have given a lot of money. We had pasta with white beans and grilled vegetables, Parmesan cheese served on the side. I watched Franny use her knife to push a piece of asparagus up the tines of her fork. So, dear, Franny said to me, what do you do? I work at Harvard, I said. You teach? No, I said. I'm an administrative coordinator. I work in the econ department. That must be very interesting, said Dodge. His head was fully bald with a spot on top that needed a medical opinion. It's mostly office work. She's also a writer, said the choreographer. She's very disciplined. She gets up at 5 every day to work. 5 a.m. goodness, said Franny. I could never wake up that early. It's what I've got, I said. I wouldn't say it's when I do my best work. What do you write about? Asked Dodge. Don't say capitalism. Many things. The quiet lasted too long. My parents always put Yo-Yo Ma on in the background for just this reason. Franny also went to Wellesley, the choreographer said to me. Franny turned to me as if she just discovered some unexpected treasure, pure delight. You're a Wellesley woman? I am. Gosh, I made such wonderful memories there. I lived in Beebe Hall. I fingered my first girlfriend in Beebe Hall. I have such wonderful memories too, I said. I tried to think of the oldest person I knew at Wellesley. Do you know Miss Pierce, the Romance Languages librarian? Yes, said Franny. She's still there? She completely saved my thesis paper. Mine too, I said. I worked my face into a smile, a thin line of friendliness. They'd brought apple pie with butter in the crust, so the choreographer just put a piece on his plate and picked around, pretending to eat. Will you be at his talk on Tuesday? Dodge asked me. I wish, but I can't, I said. The choreographer spent his weekdays working at the big summer-long dance festival nearby, teaching, giving talks, a premiere of new work scheduled for the end of the summer. I have to go back to work. Maybe you could use some vacation days, the choreographer said to me. I shook my head. I'm still earning time back after Maine. You've already been to Maine this summer, said Franny. I looked at the choreographer. I needed a break. Maine is where we met, he said, at a residency. Is that one of those programs where they feed you? Franny said. They sound so wonderful. I've thought about doing one sometime. He didn't have to do much with his face, a slight crinkle above his right eyebrow, looking at me from a different angle. I felt the mocking clear, and my own mocking met his in return. Who knew we could talk like this, without betraying ourselves, without ever saying a word? At the end of the evening, we had to guide and nudge them out the door, letting them finally slosh their way down the drive. He rubbed my shoulders, kissing my neck. You were wonderful, he said. Do you want me to stir a fire under the hot tub? The heat led up with the setting sun, the mountain air turning cool. The choreographer got out of the water before me to do some work, and I stayed alone under the great carpet of western Massachusetts stars. Sinking up to my shoulders, I listened to the distant hoots of an owl, the hum of summer insects lighting up the forest. Franny and Dodge paid for all of this, at least in part, and I paid them back with smiling, with cultured entertainment. Money and power and sex and devotion. Alone in the darkness, I played with the 4 words like marbles. The fire below the wooden tub died, leaving the water to cool rapidly. I got out and poured a pitcher down the cast iron spout to dampen the embers before tugging the cover back in place. Tightening my yellow robe around me, I finger-combed my wet hair and slipped inside. The choreographer sat on the couch, glasses on, his face illuminated by the glow of his laptop. I found my book and made a cup of chamomile tea. Carrying my mug and good morning midnight, I settled down next to him. What do you think of her? He asked, tilting his computer toward me. Jackie appeared in a sheer yellow skirt and bikini top, draped over the shoulder of a male dancer. Her pretty, pointed face looked arrested, surprised, her limbs electric and tense. She seems great, I said, blowing on my tea. Her hips stuck through the skirt. Iliac crests. Have you slept with her? I asked. No, he said. He turned to me. I never sleep with the dancer I paid. I dangled my tea bag. But you've slept with other dancers. Haven't you slept with other writers? Only unfortunately. The tea seemed strong enough. I pulled the bag out and squeezed. He looked back at the screen. She's working with TJ and Zach on the trio for the festival, he said. She's very talented, very strong. But I need her to forget her strength for the piece. She needs to be more open in her body. What does that mean? I asked. He brought his fingers to the screen, pinching across her shoulders. She always holds her scapula tight, protecting the heart area. She's too much of a performer, can't let go into the movement. The pretending never becomes real. His hand left the keyboard, his thumb stroking my inner elbow. I wish I could get them to be more like you. What, like a hobbity gremlin? I said. That's how you think of yourself? That's how I think of all writers, I said, sipping. You shouldn't want them to be like me. I'm not self-conscious in my body because I'm barely aware I have one. You seem pretty aware to me. I turned to kiss his ear. I'm only like that with you. The gesture juddered through him, a tightening followed by release. Is something wrong? I asked. He pressed the back of his hand against mine. No, he said, not at all. I looked back at his laptop, Jackie in a different pose, being lifted into the air by her ankle. What made you stop performing? I asked. I knew why, of course, but I wanted to hear specifics. He scrolled to the next image, a male dancer, I think Zach, in mid-leap. I made this part for myself once, he said, pointing at the screen. But then, bad back, bad knees, sprained ankles. I herniated a disc and knew it was time to step aside and let the young shine. He kept his voice light, but I heard an unfamiliar pain, a new ache and depth that hooked under my ribs and tugged. I wanted to press my mouth to what he named, his shattered parts. Can you put the computer away? I asked. I slid into his lap, kissing him with an open mouth, his lips parted but restrained. You want this even though I'm broken? He said, pushing open my robe. Yes, I said, please. My fingers wove into his hair and clutched the back of his skull as his hand slipped between my legs. His touch caught and grounded me, tethering me to my flesh. He burrowed his face into my sternum, his breath hot. Against my skin, he said, you should move to New York. I went rigid, a caught animal. What? I leaned away and took my hands off him. Still perched on his knees, I pulled the robe closed. No way. I thought he'd wake up, agree, but he said, why not? I'd have to upend my whole life, I said. I'd have to find a new place to live. You could stay with me for a while. He held the sides of my waist. Ha, yeah, right, I said. I could never afford your place. He looked up into my face. You wouldn't have to pay. Now the blood went the way of my muscles, everything solid, frozen. I couldn't do that, I said softly. Why not? My lease, my lungs filled, the pressure pushing into my throat, behind my eyes. Break it, my job. You hate it, he said. You wouldn't have to work. You could write. No, I said, leaning back. I didn't know what frightened me more, the speed or size of his offer. The force of my refusal entered him, pushing him back. He took a breath, gripping around my ribs as he looked away from me. Fine, he said. He turned his attention back to my body, his mouth at my collarbone as his fingers reached for the edge of my robe. It was just an idea. We moved forward into sex, but even in the middle of pleasure, I still remained confused. Until that afternoon, I hadn't even known I was his partner, such a public, heavy word. In the morning, I woke late, catching up on all the sleep I had missed during the week, thanks to the early morning writing sessions. Still under the covers, I watched him cross the open doorway, lovely in his sleeping clothes, a t-shirt and plain gray cotton pants. He really likes me, I thought, but I didn't feel what I expected, the initial giddy thrill. Instead, there was fright, and I knew then that I stood on the edge of an unfamiliar precipice. All right, we'll stop there. Thanks. Thank you for having me. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, you can both sit in these very beautifully appointed stools. We'll do a Q&A now. Does anyone have a question to start? Okay, I have a question to start. So you are both friends, and it seems like a literally fruitful friendship. How do you go about having a friend relationship that's also, in a sense, an artistic or professional one with each other? Or in general? It seems like oh, hey, will you look at this? Or does the question make sense?
I don't really remember how to have friends anymore, honestly.
Oh gosh.
We don't really share in progress. Are these on? Do we need them on?
I think they're on to be live streamed, which we are doing right now.
Okay.
So hello to anyone listening on the internet.
Yeah.
We don't share work in progress.
No. But we did first meet, when we first met here, we were in classes together.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think...
I don't really, me personally, I don't like I don't share work in progress with people I love until it's like has a destination, I guess, or a future, so there's less pressure. So that's my method. I don't know what's your method.
Yeah. I think I mean we've talked about books before. Like I think and just like talking about events and what we're reading, and I feel like I'm always like interested in how Alyssa sees things. Like I think it's more just like spending time together for us.
I feel like I learned how to like read from you in a lot of ways. I don't know. I mean, we've been friends since like, I actually don't want to count the numbers, but we've been friends since college. Like I just have distinct memories of like I have this book that is like a love story, but it's also like an auction catalog. And I remember first seeing it in like your apartment, and it like blew my mind. And I was like, I've never seen anything like this before. Like I feel like you kind of show me things that I would never really encounter in my own life.
And likewise.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, this is actually also for both of you. Also a bit about what you both chose to read. I mean, the whole book for Alyssa and Liza for the magician's story, both sort of involve characters who are public performers, right? Like physical performers. Magicians are basically the dancers of illusion. What do you think is the sort of, what has attracted you to writing into an art? I'm going to say art. Once again, I'm going to call the magicians, dancers of illusion here. That is appealing from like a writerly perspective. Like what brings you to that space?
I love that phrase. I want to take that. I've asked you this before, I think, but I want to hear what you say. I think to me it's like different ways of telling stories. I think I think of magic maybe is also just like a different kind of storytelling, and I think I'm drawn to any kind of storytelling, whether it's, I also love to watch dance, but so I think I tend to be drawn to different ways that people sort of tell various kinds of stories.
I love dancers of illusion. That's really great. And I think magic really is kind of like an art. And I love what you said about it being storytelling, because it is. It's like, if you think about like misdirection and then like the kind of final satisfying like reveal at the end, it makes a lot of sense. For me, for writing dance, it's more just trying to get kind of as far from what I sort of do every day as possible. I also think that passage I wrote about like feeling like a hobbity gremlin, like I really feel like a hobbity gremlin a lot of the time. I like spend like most of my time on the computer now, I spend most of my time in my email inbox. I feel very disconnected from kind of my physical form in a way that I find unpleasant and like not great for my like life and sense of and the way I'm living my life. And when I overlapped at a residency with like a group of dancers, and like seeing the way they inhabit their body and the way they think about their art, and how like it's both like athletic, like they have to be able to do lots of things, but it also is art making and narrative in like a really different form. And I just wanted to try to get as close to that in writing as possible, even though it felt as far from writing as possible.
And what was your research process like for that? Like, how did you accumulate the sort of vocabulary of dance?
Well, I try not to accumulate the vocabulary of dance because I didn't want to like write. Like I wanted to try to convey the experience of watching dance, but in fiction, which I realized like I couldn't do if I was describing the dance too closely, because like the actual experience of watching a performance is like internal, sort of. So I kind of focused on her internal state, and also kind of deliberately like didn't like I would like watch. It was this lockdown that I was writing it, so I would be like on Instagram, like watching like dance YouTube and stuff. But I didn't do very much research into dance until after I had a draft done and I was in revision, because I felt like I wasn't going to mess it up anymore. And then it was like very fun to read dancers' biographies and just like as like a person who does like a solo thing, it's like very fun to read the drama of people who do a group thing. There's a lot more opportunity for dynamics.
Hi, this question is for Alyssa. So the narrator in your novel is a writer, and I'm really curious about as a writer yourself, how did you navigate writing that, and were there parts of her character that were inspired by yourself, your own experiences, and how did you know that you wanted the narrator to also be a writer?
Yeah, I wanted her to also have the same experience of trying to approach dance from a really distant point. So I knew I wanted her to kind of have this similar experience to me, but I also wanted her to be a very ambitious, driven artist kind of in her own right. And for the narrative to also be a little bit about trying to figure out how to make art. And kind of the only art I really make is writing. So I just sort of use that experience because it's a first person narration. And I also kind of make fun of myself a little bit, because I gave her, she has this history of writing really cerebral anti-capitalist fiction, which is a little bit what I was doing in my 20s and not deriving any pleasure from it. And so I kind of gave her that arc as well. Did I answer your question? I felt I went on a weird ramble about my 20s.
Yeah, I guess building off of that, I'm curious if you want to talk about maybe how you've seen your writing change from when you were doing it in college to in your 20s to this book, and sort of what makes it feel special to you?
That's a great question. I also want to, do you feel like your writing has changed since college? I mean, yeah. It's been a long time since we were in college. Sorry, I have to go back into my memory box and try to remember what it was like to be a young person.
I mean, I was actually just thinking the other day about how in Max's class we would all number each line. I can't remember if that was, I guess that's we were all doing that.
Every 5, I remember now, or
and
10.
I think that kind of, I mean, what that does is makes you pay attention to each line, how each sentence is working. But I think that's something that I haven't seen any other teachers do that, and I think it's a really good practice. And I do think that that's something that increasingly, I think, in some ways, sort of to my detriment, I maybe care a lot about each sentence. Probably the longer I spend.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say.
The more.
I feel like I'm not exactly the opposite, but I did thinking about I think I had to kind of. I mean, when I was a younger person, and I'm actually working on something that's about follow someone from college to this age. So I've been kind of thinking about the ways I've changed since I was in this sort of age, and just sort of remembering how much order I craved and needed, and how I also, a lot of change happened in letting in a little bit of chaos, which was something that I was very frightened of, but had to get comfortable enough doing. And so now I'm a really messy first drafter. I have a notebook that no one can really you can't decipher it, and I'm repetitive now. I didn't used to do this, but I will kind of write a scene over and over and over again until it feels right in the notebook, and then I type it to the computer, because then it looks orderly enough for me to manage it. But I have to kind of get at something chaotic first. And that was just like a process that like I feel like I had to like age into, because I didn't quite trust myself enough to let go like that, if that makes sense.
Hello.
Hi.
I've got a question for each of you. Glad to know that Penn alums can become writers. It's nice. I don't have to give up. Okay, so my first question is for Alyssa. This is going to be a bit of a weird question. And
Great.
okay. Okay, so like I've taken a few creative writing classes before, and I feel like it's very taboo for like a young writer, especially to write like sex scenes or like be intimate at all. And I was just wondering, like, how do you write sex scenes? If I can ask that, you don't have to answer. Or intimate scenes. We can change the word.
Any phrase is fine. I think my main answer is like you just write a sex scene kind of the way you write any other scene between two characters, if you think about it. Like, I think this is like a Sally Rooney quote. Sorry to bring Sally Rooney up, but like about how like sex is like communication between two characters. And if you think about like when characters are sitting down to dinner or sitting in a room like right now, like their characters, their bodies in space trying to relate to each other, and that's kind of the exact same thing that's happening in a sex scene. It's just that I feel like when we approach a sex scene to write, we're like, oh God, it's a sex scene, and we get like kind of anxious and like wrapped up in it. But if you just think about like the mechanics of any other scene and break it down in that way, and just think about like how are these bodies in space trying to communicate with each other, and what ways they're failing, that's like a way to access it.
Thank you. And then for Liza? Okay, cool. I got it. So in your introduction it says that you're a translator, and I was just wondering, like, how does that play into like your own fiction, or when you're translating, like how does your brain work? I don't know. I can't translate stuff. So I was just wondering like how that informs your fiction.
I think it just it's to me it helps see possibilities for certain words. Like sometimes when translating, I'll highlight a word that doesn't seem like it's there's maybe like 6 different ways it could go. I mean, there's infinite ways it could go, but usually I'll try to get it down to 6 or something. And I think it just I think it adds like a dimension of play to when I'm working on fiction. I think also it's a nice sort of relief for me, because if I think that's how I sort of started translating. It's just like an exciting way to sort of see what other writers are doing. Like most recently I was translating a Bolivian poet, and her it's just like it's a nice way to see what kinds of stuff she's working on, and I think it does help me just sort of see new ways into things that when I'm stuck in my own writing. Did you say you translate also?
I can speak like 7 words in Russian.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also something that I like to, I've sort of had chances to translate from languages that I don't have like a full grasp on also. Like I had a sort of a translation pairing that brought me to Finland for a short exchange with a Finnish artist, and that was sort of a chance where I didn't know Finnish, and so I was learning the language kind of as I was working on it, and I think that sort of like novice approach to it, that doesn't work in every context. I wouldn't like try to publish something, but I think just sort of as like a way to play with language, it really helps me.
We have time for a couple more.
Hi, thank you both so much for reading. I really enjoyed it. I want to ask you about day jobs, navigating jobs, and also being a writer, specifically about editing. You're both editors. I always imagined it would be challenging to have so many other people's words in your head while also trying to write, but I can also see how that would be really pleasurable as well. And yeah, I guess I just want to hear a little bit about your experiences editing and writing and navigating that.
Oh, I want to hear yours first.
It's hard to know where to begin. I guess, I sort of just began editing. Well, I worked on 34th Street while I was here, and also on F Word. And I think I just kind of like, I did my MFA at Columbia, and we have a journal there, and we got to publish Alyssa. And I think so. I think I just have always found it's sort of similar to that translation question. Like being excited by other people's work is really a huge part of what helps me. Like on really hard days when I'm like, why are we doing anything? Just when somebody has a really exciting sentence or word or story, anything, it's just like a charge. So. Yeah, I don't know if that's really like the work writing balance part of it, because it is a lot of work. I end up spending a lot of my time editing other people's work, and also like I teach, and so that's sort of a similar thing where you get really excited about other people's projects, but I love doing it, so I think it has helped me sort of stay involved in writing when I'm in a rut or something.
Yeah, totally. I feel like the best parts of my day job are sort of getting to just see kind of the soup of the literary world. It's like sometimes I think about like all of literature being one like really large river that's just been kind of going on forever, and sometimes I feel kind of awed by like all of these individuals kind of trying to like add a little bit to this force that's kind of like larger. That's when I get like very mystical at my inbox. That's like kind of the best feelings of being like, oh, I love this sort of conversation that's happening. I love being able to add to it in this like way, and editing, editing other people's stories always feels very. It feels like really different than writing to me. It feels kind of like trying to become a bizarre psychic almost. Like it's like I'm trying to sort of see the story from the point of view of the writer and to get their like paragraph or sentence or whatever needs to happen to like go in the direction they're trying to go. I do try to keep that editor like locked in a closet as far from possible from my like writer self. Like I think if I were to let that kind of part of my brain into the writing process until like the very end, like then at the very end it's useful, but before it's like it can be very destructive, and it can be the kind of perfectionist mode that's not helpful. So that's sort of the biggest challenge, is just trying to keep the editor self far away from the kind of chaos of like actually writing. And also remembering that writing is in a lot of ways, like writing is also just kind of a job. It's like a poorly paid one. But it's like something you have to like, you like show up and do. And like thinking of it in that way also kind of makes me relax a little bit when I'm approaching it.
Do either of you have questions for one another?
I have a comment, which is that I still have the little Finnish guys that you got me when you were in Finland. Little clay things. They're on my writing desk, and they like stare at me every morning.
Nice. I'm glad they're finding their way into the writing arena.
Wow. Well, we can continue this conversation over the cheese, as mentioned, at length. And as I said, we have copies of Little Rabbit. So we very recently have gotten the ability to use PayPal, which anyone has been here previously and known that it's been a cash-only situation. That is no longer the case, except that the PayPal is broken. So you'll just have to give us your email address, and we'll send you a note later about paying for the books. But we're making the books available to you, $20. And thank you both so much. This was amazing readings. It's amazing having you back at the Writers' House. I hope you come back over and over again. Thank you both so much.